The director of national intelligence now says that he was responsible for watering down, or editing, the talking points that UN Ambassador Susan Rice used when she went on those 5 Sunday talk shows. Here's the picture, the famous picture of it, to talk about Benghazi. But you say that a few days before his office said that they were responsible for editing the talking points, that in a closed-door hearing, the head of intelligence, James Clapper, told you and other senators he didn't know who was responsible. Questions, 2 questions. Where does this investigation stand, and how do you get to the bottom of it?
Well, it's like any other. It's assumed the proportions of any other major scandal in this town. There are many layers to the onion. There's all kinds of questions that have been raised. The most recent is the one you mentioned. I saw the director of national intelligence say he didn't know where these talking points were edited. And now he's saying that he did. We'll be very interested how all that transpired. But the biggest aspect of this whole thing is it's got to be really looked into, is why there was such a failure on the part of the administration in light of events, the 2 attacks on our embassy, the assassination attempt on the British ambassador. They closed their consulate. All this long train of events that made our consulate in Benghazi a death trap. And then during that, why didn't we have military capabilities close by, especially on September 11th?
And after all these hearings so far, and we're, 2 months out, do you have any answers to those questions as to why we weren't better prepared for this possibility?
No, and I think we ought to know why as late as September 25th, 2 weeks later, the President of the United States at the United Nations was talking about hateful videos. So there's so many things that need to be resolved here. There are 4 committees in the House, 4 committees in the Senate. They're all holding different hearings, all turf fights going on, as there usually does in these bodies. And we need a select committee in order to sort this whole thing out, to find out what happened, but also we can't ever again have a tragedy such as took place in Benghazi. And it could have been prevented, in my view. Now we got to make sure that there are ways to make sure it doesn't happen.
You say that you will do everything in your power to block Susan Rice's nomination, if the president decides to name her, to be Secretary of State. She said this week that all she did was rely on the intelligence community's talking points, and then she went on to say this about you. Take a look.
I do think that some of the statements you've made about me have been unfounded, but I look forward to having the opportunity at the appropriate time to discuss all of this with him.
Is there anything that Ambassador Rice can do to change your mind about her?
She can. I will give everyone the benefit of explaining their position and the actions that they took, and I'll be glad to have the opportunity to discuss these issues with her. But why did she say that? That Al-Qaeda has been decimated in her statement here on this program? Al-Qaeda hasn't been decimated. They're on the rise. They're all over Iraq. They're training camps. They're in Libya. They're all over Syria. They're on the rise everywhere in the Middle East. So there's a lot of questions that we have for Ambassador Rice, and if she would, I'm sure that I'll have the opportunity to discuss these with her.
But you're saying that she could conceivably get your vote for Secretary of State?
I think she deserves the ability and the opportunity to explain herself and her position, just as she said. But she's not the problem. The problem is the President of the United States, who in a debate with Mitt Romney, said that he had said it was a terrorist attack. He hadn't. In fact, that night on 60 Minutes, he said they didn't know what kind of an attack it was, and he continued to say so.
He didn't say it that night. He said it in an interview with 60 Minutes, which we didn't see until...
We didn't see until after the election. I'm sure that it was such an inconsequential statement that it didn't deserve the attention of the American people before the election.
Let me pick up on one more aspect of this and we'll move on. House Democratic leader James Clyburn said this week that Lindsey Graham and you have used racial code words to go after Susan Rice. Take a look.
Senator McCain called her incompetent as well, but he told us that Sarah Payton was a very competent person to be Vice President of the United States. That ought to tell you a little bit about his judgment.
Your reaction?
You can't, dignify comments like that. I've noticed that in this town, if they can't win the argument on the merits, then of course they resort to those kinds of personal attacks. It goes with the territory.